This is the Swindon Advertiser rolling off the presses today. Affectionately known as the Adver, the newspaper has always been at the heart of its community. Most Swindonians have appeared in its pages at some point in their lives. Gavan, editor of the Swindon Advertiser, tells us of the challenges of leading his team of journalists through today's world of news gathering.
Of course, it was very sad to leave the Adver office behind. It was a place packed with history and really was the Adver. But the time came in it, and with sadness, we did have to leave Old Town behind for our new offices at Dorking. But that has allowed us to kind of look to the future. Yes, we're in a different location, but it's not the end of the Adver, and it's not the end of our role at the heart of Swindon and Swindon's community. We will still tell the story of Swindon. I started my role at the start of the year, and since then we've largely got a new team of reporters. That's allowed them to come in with a new, improved focus, looking at how we're doing digital. Obviously, the paper is hugely important and remains a great priority. Alongside that, there's the digital and the website, which is also a big priority for us going forward. So it's a case of having the reporters now focusing on how we tell our stories online, how we best speak to our digital audience, and then in tandem with that, making sure that we're making the paper that goes out every day the very, very best it can be.
Having a good working relationship with the police, ambulance and fire brigade is essential for reporters on the front line.
So what has called you out here today?
So we've been called to report of a fire alarm in a building at about 12:40 this afternoon. Prepare for the worst, so the crew are fully briefed on arrival. If we turn up and there's smoke pouring out the building, then we will go straight into an action and firefighting mode.
And have you encountered many Adver reporters when you've been out and about on business?
Occasionally, but we do encounter you guys quite often at incidents, bigger scale incidents particularly. We turn up and have to give you our time, and you guys support us with our charity events and getting community messages out there, particularly in our initiatives with smoke alarms, our safe and well visits. And yeah, we find we work quite well together.
Right.
I've been at the newspaper for 34 years now, so I think I'm in editorial. I'm probably the longest serving member of staff. Been involved in major stories, some tragic ones. We were pretty active for the Hungerford massacre, which was in 1987. Working around the clock with that one. In the more recent times, we sadly covered the murder of Sian O'Callaghan. So one of my favourite jobs, I spent the night with the fire brigade, and sort of in the evening just doing some basic training with them, and then stayed overnight in their dormitory, and about midnight the alarm went off. So it was down the pole into a fire engine, lights blaring, and we went to what turned out to be a big fire in some buildings up near Birdrop, quite close to Barrie Castle, and actually was able to hold the hose and what have you. And about halfway through, one of the fire officers who organised it came over to me and he said, "Yeah, we did this for you, Steve. This is like a training exercise."
They say a picture tells 1,000 words, and for the last few years the Advertiser has had photojournalist Tom Kelsey at the helm. What makes a good photojournalist, do you think?
So a lot of the time it's being able to convey to people the message of what the story's really about and what we want to get across to the people reading the paper. So in maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and then literally knocking on someone's door, sitting on their couch, talking to them. The image itself doesn't necessarily take long. It's the conversation of maybe 10-15 minutes of trying to get that person to, not break down the barriers, I suppose, between you being a photographer and them being someone that you've never met, basically.
Brilliant. And what are one of the highlights for you of what you've done?
A lot of the time, the highlights have been a lot of the features we've done. We've been out and done lots of different things. Always, the best part of the job's been always being out and about. Every day's different. But we've done things up at Wroughton Airfield where we photographed different parts of Charles Darwin's diaries, and we photograph things to do with Napoleon, his drawings before he invaded Egypt, apparently. And then we've met lots of different people, politicians, getting Jeremy Corbyn's phone number before he became leader of the opposition, which was quite interesting. What else? Oh, lots of different things. Running from about 2,000 Oxford fans one time across the Magic Roundabout. Probably that's not a highlight, but it's certainly in my living memory. Also, like a lot of the time, we've done stuff for families where children have had disabilities, or they've needed to use the paper as a form of advertising to help them get across their message that they need funding or donations. And when you do that and you meet the families, and then maybe 2 or 3 weeks or months later even, then they finally found their funding, and you think that actually you've helped raise 2,000-3,000 if that, or whatever, and that little girl or that little boy helps them to walk better. And you think actually that's pretty cool actually. I like that.
Old copies of the Swindon Advertiser are a social record of the town's history, and feature writer Barrie Hudson chatted to town historian and former journalist on the Adver, Graham Carter, about their importance for Swindon's heritage.
There are some images of the newspaper as it was in the old building, so for example. This one, I guess, judging by the cars, dates from the late 50s, perhaps the early 1960s, of the Adver building.
And of course it goes back a long way, the Adver, 1854,
1854.
Almost to the beginning of New Swindon, and it's the same year that the Mechanics Institute was built as well, so it's quite significant in Swindon's history.
This is this was the second of the 3 buildings we've occupied, I believe. Yeah. The first one being an office in Wood Street, shop premises.
An amazing man, William Morris. He's one of those people that you really wish you could have met. Not to be confused with the William Morris, the textile designer, or William Morris of MG, Morris Garages, Lord Nuffield. But to me, every bit as great as those 2 great people, because he was a pioneer. The Adver was the first provincial penny monthly, I think. Yeah. Good old William Morris.
Campaigning
he was, I think you sort of you feel as though he was around there in the Adver. It's what a newspaper should be.
It is.
Everything that he sort of embodied, and it was nice to think that you were working in the place where this fantastic institution had sort of grown up.
Yeah, obviously it's a heck of a wrench to leave such a place. Although there is some reassurance in that since moving, it's not an end, it's a change. It's a change after many years.
Well, times change, and if you don't realise that working on a newspaper, you're in the wrong job.
You're in the wrong job,
because it's changing every day. And so although it's sad and it's the end of an era, things have to change. I was just thinking, there's one thing that this new building probably hasn't got that the old one has, and that's the ghost.
The ghost.
Well, yes. The Adver offices, which I'm glad to say I never saw. There were quite a few stories around, especially people working late at night. The stories I've heard is of doors opening and people expecting to see somebody come through, but nobody ever did. Once I was working on a sports desk on a Sunday night. This would have been in the 1990s. Yeah. And the copy takers who did the typing, one of them had the habit of going down, when she'd finish work late on a Sunday, she'd go down and stand in the reception area waiting for her husband to pick her up. Yeah. And she went down there one night and just happened to look over at the reception and saw an old lady sat there, but there was no sort of quick way in or out. As this lady saw the lady sat down, looked away, looked back again, and she was gone.
Many youngsters dream of becoming a sports writer, but the reality can be very different, as John Carter, former Adver sports journalist and current assistant editor of the Oxford Mail, tells us.
I joined the Swindon Advertiser in 1999 and had probably the happiest 18 months of my life working on the sports desk. When I think back on my career, I made giant strides there. I was joined as a sports reporter and then started covering Swindon Town, but then also became a sub-editor as well. That's where I learned how to design pages, and we used to literally go off to a game and then come back and write up our stories and then design the pages. I've had one trip to Norwich in midweek. We went down on a Wednesday night. Game obviously kicked off at 7:45. Probably were back on the road by about 10:30. By the time we got back into the office, it was a horrible trip back. It was probably about 2 o'clock, and then we left at 6:30, having designed all the pages. So when people were coming in to start their day, we were leaving. I mean, it's mad when you look back on it, but it was really good fun.
Today it is Group Sports Editor Owen Houlihan who runs the Advertiser Sports Desk, and he tells us how his team juggles coverage of all the Wiltshire titles.
I've been at the Sports Desk for more than 15 years. I started as a junior sub-editor and writer, which meant designing as well as writing pages. And I've sort of moved through the ranks really, became Deputy Sports Editor and now Group Sports Editor. Since the Sports Desk of the 2 weekly papers, the Gazette and Herald and the Wiltshire Times and the Swindon Advertiser have combined, that's been my role for the last 4 years.
What's progressed in that time? What's changed?
Well, there's been a lot of change. Obviously, the desk had to amalgamate, which meant a complete redesign of what we do, really, and how we do it. The thing we've sort of really kept at the forefront of is trying to go to as many live events as possible and cover them. Our live output on the websites and via social media has proved very, very popular. Lots of hits, lots of reaction, lots of interaction with our readers, and that's what we've tried to maintain as much as possible.
So, up-to-date sports coverage is key, but people also like to look back at sporting heroes from the past.
It will be 25 years to the day that Swindon Town reached the Premier League for the one and only time. We'll be celebrating that event, digging out the old photos. We've appealed to readers and had great feedback actually of their experiences, of the ones that went to Wembley and what they remembered about the day, and especially the homecoming, which was obviously a huge deal for the football club. And
this one makes you feel old. This one, I was there.
Tell us about it.
It's the bringing home of the League Cup, nearly 50 years, and it's the anniversary next year. The League Cup final, 1969. I can name the team if you want me to. This is at the town hall when they were showing off the cup, and I was stood outside the town hall.
Local government reporter Tom Haworth goes behind the scenes of Swindon Borough Council.
It's a very interesting role at the moment. I involve myself mainly with the inner workings of Swindon Borough Council, which is a very interesting job. You get to meet a lot of strange and wonderful people along the way. I deal quite intimately with the councillors, the leader of the council, David Renard, the leader of the various political groups, and Jim Grant for the Labour, Stan Pajak for the Liberal Democrats. I deal with the MPs on a daily basis, Robert Buckland in the south, Justin Tomlinson in the north. It's a very, I think it's a very good relationship, generally speaking.
The Swindon Advertiser of today may appear very different, and certainly the process of producing the paper has changed beyond the imaginings of those operating the presses in 1854. But the passion of the reporters and production staff to give Swindon the best possible daily paper remains.
Whatever direction a newspaper's going, I think the Swindon Advertiser will always be around in one form or another, be it the hard copy of a newspaper or our busy website.